Howdy partners, and welcome to this Lesson Lab module titled Reinforce and Redirect, as designed and produced by GoTeach11's Teacher Certification Department at ESC Region 11. Your journey starts here. In these here parts, we'll learn methods to reinforce your expectations and come up with plans to redirect minor behavioral disruptions. Lasso yourself a copy of Teach Like a Champion 2.0, as we'll be reading from Chapter 11, High Behavioral Expectations. The rubric on the screen details how your learning will be assessed within the context of a 10-minute mini-lesson. During the mini-lesson, you'll need to reinforce your expectations for 100% of your students. You'll do this by being seen looking for compliance and making the compliance visible through effective, clear directions. You'll also need to redirect any sort of individual infractions using the least invasive intervention technique or techniques. Now that we know what we'll need to giddy up, saddle up, partner, and get ready to ride. Hey friend, let me tell you a story. High expectations, they ain't a tall tale. In order to reach higher plateaus with your students, you're going to need to lead them there. They're going to be looking at you to be the sheriff in town. This means your expectations are the law of the land, and you have to uphold what you want, or else things are bound to turn lawless and disorderly. There's one acceptable percentage of students following your lead. 100%. Less, and your authority is subject to interpretation. 100% of the students, 100% of the time, 100% of the way. There is no question that along the way you will experience tumbleweeds. Tumbleweeds are the low-level behavioral issues that arise frequently, and we can define them as students not following directions or even facing the wrong way, having their heads down or being plumb disengaged. Maybe they're on the wrong page, or they're misusing their technology on the wrong website, or doing something crazy with their scissors or glue. Crumpling paper, throwing it at each other, having unrelated chatter has nothing to do with what you're teaching, inappropriate touching or hitting, name calling, language, being out of seat, not having supplies. The good news is, with the right sort of plan and practice, you'll be able to handle these with a little effort. But if you let them pile up unattended, those little doggies will undeniably slow you down. Alright, so you're the new sheriff in town, and you want to make sure your citizens are law-abiding. This means you need to be constantly vigilant and on the lookout to nip things in the bud before they become a Texas-sized twister. We've already learned about Cain and Laird's power zone, and our cowhand Doug Lamov reiterates placing yourself in strategic locations of the room so you can respond quickly. Having teacher radar means placing yourself in a location where you could see everybody in your field of vision. Be seen looking means squaring up, standing still, and making it known that you're physically looking for compliance. If we don't look, or we don't follow through after giving a direction, that suggests we don't care. If we do the reverse, we show that, hey, it's important that you do what I asked. It's going to be a strong incentive for most students. Doug Lamov builds on the idea of squaring up and standing still and takes it even a step further with a few fun, be-seen-looking dance moves. Scan these pages and check them out on pages 391 to 392 of Teach Like a Champion 2.0. So, you got yourself perched up in the right spot. You try to make your expectations clear through your precise directions. You're seen looking for compliance. And, of course, you see a cowpoke has gone a bit astray. Making compliance visible helps get those little doggies right back on track. First of all, you make compliance visible through your specific observable directions. But another way to make compliance visible is to highlight students who are doing exactly what you ask them to. You affirm their actions by nodding their head or even verbalizing it, and then try to use your strong voice principles to quickly address a student who needs improvement, and then move forward. There are a lot of great clips in this chapter, and I encourage you to fill in any gaps to supplement your learning with them. I did want us to take a look at clip 54. As you could see, Mr. Pastor artfully being seen looking, making compliance visible, and reinforcing his expectations. So at this time, pause the video and go to my.teachlikeachampion.com to access clip 54 and take a look at some of the moves that he's doing to really reinforce his expectations. Now, when you experience minor infractions, it's best to use the least invasive intervention, just like Mr. Pastor did in that video clip. You want to catch the tumbleweeds early before they get out of hand. There's no need to shut the entire class down, there's no need to put a student on blast, and there's no need to remove the student to be locked away. Teach Like a Champion 2.0 has great information about how to reinforce and redirect while keeping a focus on learning. Pause the video now, and as you read pages 395 to 403, take brief notes about the interventions and consider which of these least invasive interventions you'll use during your mini lesson when there's opportunities to reinforce or redirect. Now that you have a better understanding of different ways to reinforce and redirect, let's take some time and put the learning into context. Think about your mini lesson and how you're going to give a whole class teach for a few minutes, and then of course you'll transition to the student talk in a small group. Think about what potential, quote, tumbleweeds could possibly happen. So predict what could happen, and then identify which least invasive interventions would best address these minor issues when they arise. So take some time now and try to forecast and predict what could happen and how you'll address that. Even after giving a least invasive intervention with high fidelity, there's still a chance a student or two will choose to continue with the misbehavior. When you've made it clear what's expected, and especially if you've already given an individual correction to a student and they're still persisting, then that means you need to step it up with the redirection and give a consequence. Just remember though that the smaller the infraction, the smaller the consequence should be. Doug Lemov writes that consequences should be quick, incremental, consistent, and depersonalized. One way to make this happen is to name the student, identify the misbehavior, and then list the consequence. Scan over pages 406 to 411 in your book to become more proficient at the art of the consequence, as it's a bit tricky trying to balance deciding when to give a correction versus a consequence. After you scan the pages, check out clip 66 and my.teachlikeachampion.com to see Mrs. McElduff combine the least invasive intervention with consequence.
Yee-haw! You've done it! You completed your learning for the module. The next few slides will help prepare you for success in your 10-minute showdown at sunset.
To receive credit for this module, you'll need to reinforce your expectations for 100% of your students. Do this by being seen looking for your students to follow your directions and make compliance visible through clear, observable directions. When minor behavioral issues do arise, you'll need to redirect the infractions using the least invasive intervention techniques. For that extra challenge, if you do deliver a consequence, allude to a behavioral point or tracking system, such as a check mark, a point, or tying some sort of money value to the misbehavior. Here are a few tips to help you out. Think about your mini lesson. You're going to have direct teach, transitioning to small group talk task. During each part, what specifically should you see your students doing? How can your directions help make compliance visible, and how can you make your expectations clear? Brainstorm possible tumbleweeds that could potentially occur during your mini lesson. Before the mini lesson starts, your instructional coach will ask you to share your predictions that might happen in order to guide your mock student audience. When you've identified what could occur, create a plan for how you'll address these minor setbacks using the least invasive interactions. Think about what point you'll provide a consequence rather than a correction. I hope you enjoyed watching this module titled Reinforce and Redirect. The ideas we discussed today will come into action every single day that you teach. The more consistent you are with your expectations through your classroom procedures posted and your directions that you give, the less you'll have to reinforce and redirect, the more the focus will be on the learning. Have a consequence plan ready before your school year starts and review it with your students so no one feels like there's a snake in their boot. This video was brought to you by Go Teach 11. We referenced material from Teach Like a Champion 2.0 and used images from 123RF and Pixabay.